I'll never forget the day that my father-in-law moved into our house. It was an amazing experience. Super, super challenging, but a massive life change. Super rewarding too. But I will never forget that day. So I just want to start there because like this topic really hits me in the heart. And we want to talk about like I just remember how hard it was for me to adjust as a relatively well-adjusted adult who loved my father-in-law. Like we got along great. It was, I won the lottery as it goes with in-laws. Like just we got along great, but even still, it was a really difficult adjustment. And at the time, our kids, we have three daughters, they were young. It was hard for me to get my arms around if it's I'm challenged like this, what must they be experiencing? So
Yeah.
that's just my opening thought on this topic. What do you have?
Well, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it in your voice that there must have been tremendous overwhelm, right? And you're feeling probably conflicted, torn about, how you're going to separate these two different roles, father and just living in your home the way you always have, and then now being a caregiver. What things are going to be turned upside down? Worried about the whole situation. Am I going to be a good caregiver? Am I still going to be a good parent? And probably unprepared.
Yeah, unprepared for sure because well, I mean, no one's prepared for caregiving to begin with. We know
Yeah.
this. We talk about this in every session. Uh, but for me, it was in my case, I was an only child growing up. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I felt so acutely just the shrinking of me time, which was
Mhm.
already shrunken because I was caregiving
Right.
and a parent, right? So
Right.
like there was this
Right.
just incremental waterfall of shrinkage on my own
Ah,
time, you know?
that's a great way to
That
describe it.
that really it kind of smacked me in the face. But then I remember having there was an aha moment with one of our children, our middle daughter, that she initially was really having a hard we didn't notice right away, but she was
Yeah.
having a hard time with the
Mhm.
adjustment. She felt like her life was turned upside down. And it kind of was, right? But
Yeah.
like so that was my for me, when I think about our topic, which is about how can we help children adjust to a situation like this? That's sort of the moment I go back to.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about some things that, well, for starters, no shade at myself here, but I wish I had done when I was going through this. But the first tip I would throw out is sort of acknowledging how big, like just the size of the life change. I don't think we did that. I mean, of course, our kids knew it was happening and you know, we thought we were sort of setting expectations, but really leaning into the magnitude of the change to the sort of family, the house dynamic, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it had to be hard to try to figure that out, to even set those expectations because you weren't sure what they were either, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But like so I think of like if I could go back to do it over again, um, I would and it's stuff we talk about all the time and in a lot of these sessions, like as we know, like there's so many common thread sort of themes that run through any caregiving discussion.
Yeah.
Communication is certainly one of those.
Yeah.
Um, but asking sort of open-ended questions like you know, this is happening, things, Poppy and that's what we called my father-in-law, Poppy's moving in. This is here are some rough things you can expect, but like how do you feel about this? How does this make you feel? What do
Yeah.
you think? And not just asking the questions, but asking them open-ended and like being okay to sit in that silence and not fill that space to let them respond and get them talking about it.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know how that went with you. Like, I would think one of the things that has to be tough as a parent is to say, like, "I'm not sure," when a question comes up, and I think it's really important. I think it's important to keep communication super simple and super honest.
Mhm.
Like, "You know what? I'm not sure of this," and then find opportunities. I love, answering those questions the best you can, trying to dig deeper and get to the open-ended questions, but, find those opportunities where either structured, like we're gonna have a weekly meeting and we're gonna just check in to see how everybody's feeling,
Yep.
or take advantage of driving to school time or bedtime, depending on the age of your kids. I don't know how you feel about that or if you ever felt pressured or worried about answering a question right away. I just feel like it had to be really tough to put
Yeah.
yourself in the spot.
It was so we're talking about the tough parts because they're the stuff that we need help with. So I just want to throw out, and this is important to me personally and across all caregiving topics, but caregiving is like there's a happy side of caregiving. So I'll just say that, right? And it's just a
Mhm.
blanket statement. But this was tough. And something you just said resonated that I don't, and this was advice that my wife Lindsay and I got at a certain point was to answer questions and say, I don't know. If we don't know the answer, to be honest, like you said about it, and say, I don't know, but we'll find out together. Right.
Yeah,
Because that and the person who had given us this advice was someone obviously that had been through this and we knew them, we trusted them. But the we'll find out together piece is kind of important, like an important sidecar to just the vulnerability of saying, I don't know. Again, the
yeah,
honesty of saying that because
right.
it enrolls them in the process. It like gives them some agency. Um,
Yeah, and
so
also, like you said, like, we're gonna work through it together. It really helps them feel like they're a part of it and that they matter and their decisions count.
exactly. So the other big thing about communication is, and we did some of this, but it's sort of helping them understand why we made the choice to do this.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
So that, and then like there's an element of that that is kind of about what we were just talking about, which is sort of enrolling them in the process, I guess, but giving them that context. Because, in our case, at that time, we were caring for my mom who was not living in our home. She was living in a community, and we were caring for my father-in-law, both of whom were living with a form of dementia. My mom was living with Alzheimer's disease. Steve, my father-in-law, was living with Lewy body dementia. But this was a really important. It was an important but kind of tricky thing because, like, how do you help at that time, Emma, our middle, was 10. Like a 10-year-old understand what dementia is,
right.
right? So like
Yeah.
there's I guess the point is helping the child understand why the choice was made sort of opens a little bit of a Pandora's box, a good Pandora's box, I guess, if there is such a thing, into these other conversations.
Yeah, and I think it's probably different, and I'm sure since you had 3 different age groups there, you talk to your youngest one a little bit differently. Maybe it's more like, we're really close to our family and we take care of each other, and so that's what we're gonna do because grandma or grandpa are not able to do it on their own, so we wanna be able to help them. As they get older, you could start talking, maybe if it's a teenager, you could talk about some of the more condition specific things, but I
Mhm.
think it depends on the family dynamics and it depends on the age.
Yeah. Um, Agreed. The family dynamics, I'm glad you mentioned that because there is no, and I'm zooming out for a second here, and we've had sessions on this specific topic, like what's right. Do they
Yeah,
keep the person you're caring for at home, or when they're at a point at which they need more support than they can provide for themselves? There's the choice, right? The
yeah,
choice.
yeah.
Do they stay home or move in with you, or do they transition to the support of like a professional community that
Right.
can give them the support they need? But there's no right answer to that, right? Like
Nope.
it's different for every family, and there's a
Mhm.
million factors that are related to the family dynamics and the situation that drive that.
Yeah,
Um, and it's I think a lot of those same themes come into or could be helpful to be entered into these conversations with kids in a situation where you do move someone into the home. And it
yeah.
was with us because in our case, my father-in-law, we tried. a memory care community near our house first, and it just didn't work. It just wasn't a fit for him.
Yeah.
Um, so we tried as best we could to explain why, not just that it didn't work, but why it didn't
Yeah.
work, so the kids would understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's individual and, just to keep them right along, going down the road with you. Like, this is what we're going to try. It didn't feel right. And you know why? This is why we don't feel like that was a good idea. We're going to try this one.
Mm.
So, they're a part of it. It's great.
Hmm. Yeah, which is a recurring theme. We're going to sort of pick up on that thread in a minute here. And just a reminder, if there are questions, perspectives that you'd like to share, um, from your personal experience, please do share them in the chat or in the Q&A icons down in the bottom of the Zoom here. The other, and I'm a little bit of master of the obvious here, but like so many of these conversations, Sheila, we're not coming in and dropping some like unbelievably unique and just magnificent sort of innovative thing, right? That, like, as we talked about, it's just hard when you're in the weeds of caregiving to think clearly often
Yep.
sometimes. And like all of these little things sort of add up to make a difference, right? And we
Yeah.
see that time and time and time again. So one of those other little things is setting expectations for the kids. And this is actually something I think we did pretty well. But like, and the big thing was that yes, like things will be different, but our commitment to keep your routine the same. So
Yeah.
school, activities, sports, like all of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And that really seemed to help.
Really important. And I think it's important probably to be real, once again, like paint a realistic picture of what might happen. And you could also say it like, we're not sure, but
Mhm.
here's some things that you might see that are going to be different. Like, grandpa uses a walker. So that might be in the living room from now on.
Mhm.
He's going to sleep downstairs. So that means maybe the TV can't be quite as loud as we used to have it.
Mhm.
Um, or, we're probably not gonna be able to have quite as many sleepovers as you used to have, but guess what? We're gonna do some other things, and here's some ideas for other ways that you could have fun with your friends.
Mhm.
So it's just like kind of giving them a sense of what they can expect the changes to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, couldn't agree more. Biggest challenges in our house are our house is kind of open, so noise travels, and so the
Yeah.
volume level, I think, at certain times of day was
With
one of
3
the
girls, Matt, of
big,
course.
biggest challenges. And if I'm being totally candid, which we're prone to do in these sessions, it was also one of the biggest points of tension between my wife and I. And
Mhm.
there were times when we were on, different sides of the issue, but
Uh-huh.
as time went on, and it's a challenge, right? There's no sort of magic wand to wave to make it easy, other than the common themes we talk often about around giving ourselves and everyone else involved grace. That's not just lip service. Like when we say that, we really mean trying to practice that. And I would include ourselves in that also, because at 5 o'clock when homework's going on and it's Steve's dinner time and he's at the kitchen table and there's homework being done over here and a loud TV over there and the dog doing something silly over here, like tensions just rise. It's
Yeah.
like the intensity is ratcheted up.
I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because we're talking about the kids, but this is always also about the family
Yes.
the couple themselves. One of the best things that I've heard in the past is a couple that was going through a very similar situation, and they just made this commitment every morning to get up and say, you know what, we're going to have some stressful times today, and it's going to be rough. And let's decide right now that we're not going to turn things into a bad situation if we can't like catch ourselves in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to happen. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I like that. So a couple other things and we started doing as we learned as time went on. One of them you've already mentioned, but checking in. So for us, that looked like we tried our best on some regular schedule, not weekly, but at least every couple or few weeks. At least one of us would have some alone time with one of
Yeah.
the kids, specifically to talk about how things are going, how they're feeling, what's going on, just to have that connection time, right? Because at
Yep.
the start of the conversation, I was talking about how, as in a relatively well-adjusted adult male, I'm having trouble like struggling with the fact that my time to myself was shrunk. That's only amplified for the kids, right? Like, so having sort of and sometimes it was just time in a car ride to from school or to an activity or what have
Yeah.
you. But we tried to, as best we could, sort of make that a little special. Or special is probably not the right word, but a little different than the norm, right? So like
Yeah.
this is something that we're
Focused.
intentionally trying to talk about. Like I want to
Right.
understand Emma, my middle daughter. Like how are you feeling about this? And sometimes the answer was like good, fine.
Yeah.
Other times it
Right.
wasn't,
Right.
right? Like other times it wasn't. It was, we got stuff out of that.
Mm.
The so the other thing that was kind of helpful was to have, it's almost like the opposite of respite care, right? Like we tried to make space for non-Poppy times, like times when Poppy
Yeah.
wasn't in the house
Right.
and they could kind of go buck wild, like just like,
Yeah.
like have the run of the place. Of course, there was, so the governor was off on volume at certain times of day and all that other sort of stuff. That really seemed to help as well. And that also became harder as time went on and his condition progressed. And it was harder to get him out of the house, but until it became more difficult, that was really a win-win, right? Because the other side of this is like, uh, how can we, and I guess this was something woven through everything we were thinking about, but like, how can we do the best for both constituent? How
Yeah.
can we do the best for the kids and for Steve?
It's a lot to think about.
So getting him on a drive to go look at the boats down by the lake and have an ice cream for 2 hours.
Yep.
Like it was a nice little perk for the kids to have that time, particularly
Sure.
like on a weekend when they're, in the house or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Oh, checking the tip. So we have one more. We have like about a few minutes left, but one more tip. Uh, that I think is really, really important. Uh, Again, simple but important, but involving them, right? And this
Yeah.
is somewhat of a delicate balance because, it was important to us um, not to have our kids feel like, and this was advice given to us. We didn't think of this on our own, but not to have them feel like caring for their father-in-law or for their grandfather was their responsibility. Like
Yeah.
we didn't want them feeling weighed down by that, but we wanted them to be involved for lots of different reasons. Well, what's your take
Yeah,
on
I
that?
think I think it's important. It's important to if you're bringing a family member into the home, then they're a family member and it's not the core family, but I think it really creates a bond between the kids and the grandparents or whoever that is. And you can choose age appropriate things, like maybe it's just reading out loud a story to grandma or grandpa or drawing pictures for their room or, playing games. And then as the kids get older, it might be, I can help you figure out your iPad or even just helping around the house with the older
Yeah,
ones. So I think it makes them feel useful and more connected to the family as a whole.
yeah, amen to all of that. And I'm glad you mentioned age appropriate. Um,
Yeah.
and the sort of the combination of age appropriate and sort of aligned to their interest, which and a lot sometimes it was just, hey, sit down and Poppy's watching Sports Center, like sit down and watch it with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or show Poppy one of your favorite shows.
Yep.
Could be that, could be reading to them, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, all of that, like we had a digital picture frame in our kitchen, so our youngest Lucy would sit with Poppy and sort of watch the picture frame with him.
Yeah,
Um,
that's sweet.
Stuff like that. So, but really, you said I forget exactly the words you used, but I knew what you meant. But a multitude of benefits, The most important to my for my money is them, the feeling they get from it, and the
Right.
bond. You use the word bond, but the
Yeah.
time that they get to spend with, um, with in my case, Steve. But also the just like for him, the time. And again, it's can be tricky as yesterday we were on an event where we are talking about dementia specifically and talking a lot about sort of the perspective of the person living with dementia. And, with Steve, his affect was flattened. He was living with Lewy body dementia. It was hard to get a read on him and, how
Right.
he was doing in a given moment. Was he enjoying something? Was he not? Was he engaged? Was he not? Uh, but in retrospect, we know that, like under sort of that shroud of Lewy body dementia, he's there and wanting to
Yeah.
engage and participate in the
Yeah.
world around him.
And that's
So
just
that
it. Everybody
there's the benefit.
wants to be connected.
Yeah. So, and I tell you, like anytime I see one of the pictures of any of the kids with him, like I saw one the other day of our youngest, who she was very small then, but she was out in the driveway. He was in his wheelchair, and she's playing catch with him with the tennis ball.
Love it.
So
That's great.
anyway,
Great memories.
yeah, but so we're just about at time. I'm actually going to drop a resource into the chat. It's an article that sort of um sums a lot of what we've been talking about up. It's a short read. It's 2 or 3 minutes, hitting on some of these points from the article. That link will take you to the Carallel app. You'll be able to read it without signing in, but if you want to do some other stuff in the app, look at other things in the library, what have you, you'll have to sign in, um, or sign up. So, and the way you do that is with your health plan member ID or your loved ones or your work email, whatever identifier your sponsor uses. The parting thoughts on this.
Well, I
What
think
do you
you
got?
touched on a lot of things. I think it's important to keep routines and family traditions. I think you also talked about validating their feelings. I think it's important to normalize how they feel. It sounds like you're frustrated, and that's okay. I would be too. It sounds like you got embarrassed when, um, and make sure they understand that's a normal human thing, and you sometimes feel that too. So I would say normalize feelings, normalize the uncertainty. That's going to build trust between you and your child and help them build healthy coping skills. And keep in mind that what works today may not work tomorrow. So be flexible and adaptable yourselves.
Yeah, love it. Flexibility and adaptability are
Right.
are musts. So glad to hear you mention that. I think in addition to everything that we've talked about and you just summed up, Sheila, I think the other thing I don't think that we've mentioned, but consistency is really important. So whether it's, the time that I was referring to that we tried to make for alone with each one of our kids, or just the routine in general, the routine in the house, but the routine also for the kids outside of the house, keeping all of that as
Rules.
consistent as possible.
Yep.
Yeah, really do pay off. I do. So that's that. But I also just want to reiterate sort of a point we made earlier, closer to the start of the discussion, which this isn't for everyone, right? And there is what's right for one family may not be right or possible for the next. So that's probably the case, honestly. It's not more often than not like that. That's just what happens. There is no universal right answer to this question of should we move them in or not. So everything we've been talking about, but just because you move someone in doesn't mean it has to be forever either. So if it's not
Got to keep
working,
that
it's
in
not
mind.
working. So like as we talk about in many of these discussions, checking in with ourselves. And again, that's not a platitude. It's something easy to say. It's not as easy to do, to actually do. So in a way that works for you, figuring that out and sort of sticking to that for yourself, for your
Yeah.
own sort of well-being, like is something that I could not recommend more, and comes in it did for me, I think it would for you, comes in very, very handy in situations like this.
I
So,
think it has to be pretty common where parents try to hold it all together and try to be the one with all the answers or doing everything right. I mean, we just don't have to. And it's
yeah,
it's hard on us to do that. So,
yeah.
um Yeah, this is a tough thing.
It is. Also wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
tough at times for sure. With that, Sheila, I think we're over time, and just thanks everybody, and thank you, partner, of course, for joining me once again.
Okay, everybody
All right.
take good care.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.